I'm going to show you a very exciting and instructive game to prove that positional chess is so important to be a successful attacker. I mean, it's very logical. You can only go for an attack if your pieces are well placed. And well, how to do that? There's no better example than just to have a look at the following game played by the greatest player of all time, Magnus Carlsen. He's playing an online event on chess.com titled Tuesday. He's playing with the white pieces against a Polish FIDE master, almost 500 rating points lower rated than him. His name is Filip Dowgird, if I pronounce correctly. And it's a super exciting and instructive game. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy it as well. And definitely you will learn something from it. Here we go, as Magnus just goes for 1b3, trying to avoid all sort of opening theory just to get a game. It's a nice pawn move. Black goes for the move d5 and white is going to develop this bishop to the long diagonal. And look at that monster later in the game, guys. Don't forget that bishop. Knight f6, knight f3, bishop f5. Also very logical play, as black is intending here to go e6 and c6, creating a nice pawn structure with the bishop outside the pawn chain. And white has a lot of different ways of proceeding here. For instance, you can play moves like e3 or g3, just continuing your development in a slow manner. But Magnus goes here for the move knight h4. Very interesting idea. You see this very often in modern chess, that white really wants to trade off the knight for this bishop to grab the bishop pair. And well, there are a lot of different ways for black to deal with it. The bishop can go anywhere, can even just go back to c8. It's of course a waste of time, but at the same time, white may wonder if his knight on h4 is that well placed. Anyway, we don't know. It all didn't happen. Bishop g6 was played. And it's also a reasonable move, but definitely white is able now to trade off the knight for the bishop very soon. But before doing that, white played the move g3. Black continues with e6, bishop g2. Black plays c6. So this bishop on g2, it's not really able to exert pressure on this block, the pawn block on d5. White continues with d3, knight bd7, and knight e2. Very natural developing play, and it's interesting. I mean, over the last couple of moves, white had this option to take on g6, and if black wanted, still here he could have played something like bishop h5 to keep the bishop on the board. So it's very subtle whether you should take or not. Should white take himself on g6, or should black keep the bishop on the board if possible? Anyway, black played here the move a5, looking for a way to generate counterplay on the queen side. But now white finally decides here to take on g6. Black recaptures towards the center, of course. Now the pawn chain is still looking quite solid. And white played here the move a3. I think this is a very important move in these sort of reti type of openings. The pawn is quite useful here. It covers the b4 square. And to be honest, I think the next move by black is a serious inaccurate mistake. It's a very understandable move, a4, to generate some play on the queen side. But I should point out that something like bishop d6 is more solid, and then you can put the queen either on e7 or sometimes on c7. I do slightly prefer white. I believe in the prospects of the side with the two bishops, as later on the position may still be opened. However, okay, this all didn't happen. I mean, in the game there followed a4. And why is this not such a good move? Is white can respond here with b4, and now the pawn on a3 can never really be targeted by this bishop any longer. Black even followed here up with this move, b7, b5. And I think the idea is that white can never use the b pawn any longer, but look at this, the pawn is coming to c4. And what white is really trying to do is to force black to make a decision what to do with that pawn on d5. If the pawn on d5 is going to move, this bishop on g2 will gain in strength, as it's able to hit the pawn on c6. Now, again, there are different ways of playing, but I feel that white is very comfortable here. Black went for rook c8. And what is white going to do? Is white going to take? Probably not. Better maintain the tension or even advance your pawn to c5 so that the bishop cannot be developed to an active square. But Magnus said, well, I'm flexible. I play rook c1. It's also a good move. I like it. Knight went to b6. And still, you can play a move like c5 with tempo so that the knight will be forced to go back. But Magnus says, well, I'm just going to castle. And after bishop e7, now he played the move e4. He really wants to open up the position. The more pawns in the center are gone, the more powerful these bishops will become. Black decided here to take on c4, and white does recapture. Very nice positional chess, guys, as you can see that white is really putting some pressure on the pawn on b5. Like the queen can come to e2 with pressure against the pawn over there. Black castled, and white played the move c5, attacking the knight. Now finally the tension in the center is sort of released. The knight has to go back to d7. And what is white gonna do now? Look at this. This beautiful bishop on b2 is looking for some action on this diagonal, but it's not happening anytime soon. But instead, white played here the move e5, attacking the other knight, so that the knight now gets a beautiful square on d5, but that's the only thing it has. It doesn't have any good square to go to. I mean, all the squares forward, they have been covered by white pieces, and white is now trying to take advantage of his huge space advantage as the knight comes into e4. This is what I really like in general, like far advanced pawns, and then bishops still on their fianchettoed position on b2 and g2. They work from a long distance. Remember that bishops, you can place them far away, and knights, you should put them closer to the center. That's exactly what's happening here. Queen went to c7, and now the knight jumps into d6. It's a beautiful outpost for the knight on d6. It's the octopus. It's counting on the support of the two pawns. So here you're attacking the rook on c8, and well, taking that knight on d6, it does give white a fantastic luxury problem, like how to recapture. Probably taking with the c pawn is nice, as it does open up the c file for the rook and it hits the queen. But probably taking with the pawn is even more beautiful, as it does open up the diagonal for the bishop to hit the king on the king side. Like g7 is a really serious target. So black doesn't really want to take. Black decided here to play the move rook b8. And how should white proceed? I mean, queen side is closed, center is closed. Shift the attention to the other side of the board with the move h4. Very nice thematical way of playing, as white really wants to follow it up with h5. And then, well, you try to remove that annoying pawn from g6. Rook fd8. Of course, you can play h5. That's, I think, what the majority of people would do here. But Magnus says, well, before I do that, I improve my other rook. It's just a little bit better placed on e1. Like overprotecting the pawn on e5. I don't think that's the main issue. But who knows, maybe the rook can come to e4 and look for ways to join the attack on the via the fourth rank. So black played here this move, knight f8, and maybe it's not such a good move. But what else should be done? I mean, it's impossible for black to activate the major pieces. The knight on d6 is an absolute nuisance. It prevents all sorts of counterplay. But especially here, guys, I think the following moment is super instructive, as white needs to come up with a plan. I mean, we have discussed already several ideas. But basically, the best piece here for black is the knight on d5. And white decided here to trade off the bishop for the knight. It's a remarkable move. And I imagine a lot of people would not do that. But after recapturing with the c-pawn, if you do take with the e-pawn, similar things may happen. But the big point here is that now Magnus followed it up with the move queen f3, attacking black on his most vulnerable point. It's the pawn on f7. It's attacked by that knight on d6, the big octopus together with the queen. And how are you going to defend that pawn? It's simply impossible. There's no piece to defend it here. I mean, if you move the bishop can just be captured. One reason why white decided first to take with the bishop on d5 is that the move f6 is not possible. Had there been a knight on d5, the knight would still have been covering that f6 square. But in this case, you can just take everything on f6, and black's position is falling apart. It's a big pawn, and black's king side is just opened up now. So f6 is also not going to help. If you play f5, it's the same thing. White can capture en passant. That's no solution. So black is absolutely forced here to give up the bishop for the knight. You do take back with the pawn, and look at these fantastic connected passed pawns. They can come forward if the queen goes away. So the queen has to block the c6 square. And these pawns, even though they're stopped now, it's very annoying for black's major pieces. As here, this bishop on b2 is an absolute monster. You cannot compare a knight with a bishop in such position. I mean, normally they're like same sort of quality. They're almost equal. They have different characteristics, of course. But here the black king is in deep trouble. And white continues with the move h5, continuing with that plan of creating a second weakness on the king side, intending to open up the position there. And well, black is having a very difficult time what to do. I mean, if you do take on h5, you can take back with the queen. And there are all sorts of ideas, for instance, to create such a rook lift to the h file. It can be accomplished in different ways, but this is just one very nice idea, which is very difficult to prevent. And even if you try to keep the position close with g5, white will play h6, and now you can feel this pressure against the pawn on g7. If you do take on h6, then the queen finds its way inside black's camp. It's either mate on g7 or h8. So therefore, after h5, Dowgird played here the move rook b7. So hoping that the rook may just be in time to defend along the 7th rank. But now, rather than taking on g6, which is absolutely fine, that h-pawn can cause damage in a different way as well. And look at the following move. It's a stunning idea, worth remembering. It's here the move bishop takes g7. Amazing piece sacrifice to open up the king side. Basically, black again is forced to take the bishop. Otherwise, black will be busted on the dark squares anyway. So you do take with the king. But now, there's the move h6 check. The king is forced to go somewhere. But if you, for instance, go back to g8, well, then the queen will come into f6, and mate on g7, thanks to the pawn on h6, cannot be avoided. And similar things happen if the king goes to h7. So, well, black is forced here to take with the king. And where is white's compensation? He has sacrificed the full bishop, but look at this. There is queen f6. Beautiful move, preventing the king from coming back into its own cage. The king is now cut off along the h-file. But first things first, the rook on d8 is under an attack. And well, if white gets the chance here to take it, white regains all the material with an overwhelming, completely decisive advantage. And black realized here that his position is just lost. He resigned against world's number 1. After moving the rook, for instance, rook d to d7, you can move the king to g2. And here you see that there's an alternative way to get the rook closer to the king. You don't need to move it via an already open file via the 4th rank. Now the rook is coming to the h file, and this is leading to checkmate in a few. I mean, even if you try to give one more check, this cover check with by moving the pawn, queen is giving a check, you can play f3, and well, it's absolutely game over. The king can't really do anything. If you go back to h7, the rook will come to h1, and if you do go back with the king to g8, then you can just choose how to deliver checkmate, which piece to put on h8. It's either the rook or the queen. Both is checkmate. But absolutely fantastic game. And once again, you see how important it is to place your pieces well. Magnus Carlsen just played a fantastic, nice positional game. And that led to a beautiful victory in only 29 moves, thanks to a beautiful bishop sacrifice at the end. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this game? If you would like to see more instructive videos like this, just let me know in the comments. But one little favor, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. I really need your help to grow the channel. Thanks for everything. I will see you soon again. Bye bye.